and welcome to Spring Global on Western Spring Television. Now the headlines. 32 people killed in an explosion targeting police at a mosque in the Pakistani city of Peshawar. 8 people killed during a mass shooting at the birthday party in South Africa's Eastern Cape province. Israeli forces kill a Pakistani man in the southern city of Hebron in the occupied West Bank. My name is Evelyn Ohiola, and now the news in detail. Reactions have continued to trail reports of the unavailability of new naira notes in commercial banks across the country as the extension of the deadline for the phasing out of old notes comes into effect. Residents of Osun State have expressed dissatisfaction at the level of circulation of the notes. Emmanuel Ujoadigele has more on the story.
It is one day after the extension of the cash swap policy by the Central Bank of Nigeria (CBN), and customers have besieged a popular commercial bank in Osogbo, the Osun State capital. Running out of patience, having waited for more than 5 hours without access to the new note, the customers soon become agitated and rowdy. One of such customers, Ms. Beatrice Adeyemi, told Western Spring Television News that she traveled from Iragbiji to use the bank, but her hopes of getting the new notes were dashed.
What I feel is that Nigeria is not good. Both of our leaders treat us like we are goats, and that's not good. They are suffering us. In Nigeria, we have never in Nigeria, most of us we are poor. Let me go cool like that.
Another bank customer, Mr. Raji Kazim, expressed his pleasure at the failure of banks to handle the situation properly.
Well, I consider that it's a very good idea because this issue of a new Naira design is not in circulation as we expected. But with the extension of this the period, I know that the money will be circulating. But the issue that we have with the bank now is they are not even giving us this money across the counter. There is no withdrawal across the counter. It's only where you can have access to it on ATM machine. That is the issue that we have with that. I believe that the CBN, they have to monitor these people in order for them to dispense this money.
Away from that bank, Meshak Babatunde was another frustrated customer who accused bank officials of conniving with politicians to halt the new Naira note in blatant disregard of CBN orders.
Understand? I've been here since the morning. I couldn't get any money. Can you imagine? I stressed before I get my money and I save my money to bank, but to have it back is very difficult. Can you imagine? See, this government, we could never forget it. She understands, we are too sovereign. Even a lot of people, they have been here early in the morning, like 5 a.m. in the morning. They couldn't get any money. At POS, if you want to withdraw maybe like 5,000 naira, you are going to pay 1,000 naira.
Okpeyemi Amos is another bank customer whose frustration could barely be put into words.
Well, I don't know. The only thing, maybe because I go to bank today since 5 o'clock, but I don't see the money. I won't collect money, but I don't see since 5 o'clock. Even if you see so many people in the bank, people plenty for there. There's no get the money, but I don't know.
At the popular Igbono market, traders who were reluctant to speak on record appreciated the extension of the deadline, but pleaded for the notes to be available. Point of sale operators like Mrs. Ali Zainab also had their own complaints.
New cash, I don't have any new cash because it's not available in the bank. Even in the ATM, we can't find new notes there. It's only old note that we dispensed today. Even I don't work yesterday because of these new notes, so we don't have. So some of our customers just they go because there is no money in the town. Even those that is selling the market, when they come, only we are just waiting for deposit for the old notes to use for the work for today.
From banking halls to automated teller machines, ATMs to shops and the markets, the frustration and anxiety is the same. Irrespective of their backgrounds, the ordinary people are saying the same thing. The new Naira notes are simply not enough in circulation. It remains to be seen how this will be addressed by the CBN.
From the banking halls to the ATM stands, down to ordinary shops and even in the marketplaces, the frustration can be felt. The feeling is the same and the sentiment everywhere is the same. The people are not just satisfied with the level of circulation of the new Naira notes. Even though the central bank has extended the deadline for the cash swap policy, it appears that people are still unable to access this note, and it is hoped that the central bank will address this issue before the expiration of its new deadline. Emmanuel Ujadugele, Western Spring Television News.
32 people have been killed and about 150 others wounded in an explosion targeting police at a mosque in the northwestern Pakistani city of Peshawar. According to a Peshawar police official, about 150 people were injured in total and at least 32 people were killed. In a statement, the Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif condemned the bombing and ordered authorities to ensure the best possible medical treatment for the victims. He further promised to take stern action against those behind the attack. The mosque is inside a highly fortified compound that includes the headquarters of the Provincial Police Force and the Counter-Terrorism Department. Videos that appear on social media show that part of the building was completely destroyed. In Africa, 8 people have been killed and 4 others injured during a mass shooting at a birthday party in Kubaha City in South Africa's Eastern Cape province. 2 unidentified gunmen randomly shot at guests who were dancing and mingling at a house party in KwaZulu Township. Police say no arrests have been made, but a manhunt is underway. Also, those killed and injured have not been identified. However, the Eastern Cape Police Commissioner Nomenthali Lilian Mene revealed the owner of the attack house was among them. The police minister and the National Police Commissioner are expected to visit the scene of the Sunday afternoon attack. South Africa has one of the highest gun crime rates in the world, but random mass shootings are uncommon. Last year, the country saw a string of shootings in separate taverns, which left more than 20 people dead. Those shootings are still under investigation. More than 24 Madagascans have died and tens of thousands have been left homeless since a severe tropical cyclone made landfall last week and swelled 4 days off the island's western coast. Official records show a cyclone named Chineso smashed into northeastern Madagascar 10 days ago, bringing strong winds and triggering downpours that have caused extensive flooding. Over the week, it tracked southeastwards, extending damage to houses and schools and cutting off several national roads. 25 people are now known to have died and 21 others are still missing. According to an update from Madagascar's Office for Risk and Disaster Management yesterday, at least 83,181 people have been affected, with nearly 38,000 displaced from their homes. The Disaster Management Office said in an earlier update on Friday night that more than 23,600 houses were flooded and at least 500 others are completely destroyed. To the Russia-Ukraine war, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has met with the Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen in the southern Ukrainian region of Mykolaiv. Mr. Zelensky disclosed this in a Telegram post, stating that during the talks, he had reviewed the state of region's energy infrastructure, the means of its protection, and the pace of recovery. He added that they both discussed the operational situation in the south of Ukraine, as well as the consequences of Russia's missile and drone attacks. Former Britain's Prime Minister Boris Johnson has said Vladimir Putin threatened him with a missile strike in an extraordinary phone call in the run-up to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The then Prime Minister said Mr. Putin told him it would only take a minute. Mr. Johnson said the comment was made after he warned the war would be an utter catastrophe during a very long call in February 2022. Details of the exchange are revealed in a BBC documentary examining Mr. Putin's interactions with world leaders. Mr. Johnson warned Mr. Putin that invading Ukraine would lead to Western sanctions and more NATO troops on Russia's borders. However, the Kremlin has accused Boris Johnson of lying, stating that the incident never occurred. The Secretary General of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, Jens Stoltenberg, has urged South Korea to step up its military support for Ukraine, citing other governments that have changed their policies on exporting weapons to countries in conflict following the Russian invasion. Mr. Stoltenberg made the appeal today in the South Korean capital, Seoul. is in the city of the first leg of an Asian trip that will also include stops in Japan and is aimed at boosting ties with the region's democratic allies in the face of the war in Ukraine and rising competition with China. In meetings with senior South Korean officials, Stoltenberg argued that events in Europe and North America are interconnected with other regions and that the allies want to help manage global threats by increasing partnerships in Asia. South Korea is an important global arms exporter and has recently signed deals to sell hundreds of tanks to European countries, including NATO member Poland. But South Korean law bans the export of weapons to countries in active conflict, which Seoul has said makes it difficult to provide arms directly to Kyiv. Polish Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki has said Poland is ready to transfer F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine in coordination with NATO. Mr. Morawiecki disclosed when he inspected some military equipment at a base, stating that the Eastern European nation will work in coordination with Transatlantic Military Alliance. He further stated that the country has set out a plan to increase defense spending, adding that the country needs to arm itself faster in light of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. He further disclosed that the country's defense budget will amount to 4% of gross domestic product, GDP, this year. According to figures from the Transatlantic Alliance, Poland's military spending in 2022 equaled 2.4% of its GDP, the third highest percentage among NATO countries. In the meantime, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has signaled that Ankara could accept Finland into NATO before taking any action on the membership of its Nordic neighbor, Sweden. Mr. Erdogan stated this days after Ankara suspended NATO accession talks with the two countries after a protest in Stockholm in which a far-right politician burned a copy of the Quran. Mr. Erdogan, in a televised speech, said Turkey may deliver Finland a different message and Sweden would be shocked when they see their message, calling on Finland not to make the same mistake Sweden did. Sweden and Finland applied last year to join NATO after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, dropping their long-standing military non-alignment. However, Finland's Foreign Minister Pekka Haavisto says it is maintaining its plans to join NATO at the same time as Nordic neighbor Sweden, despite a potential Turkish bloc on the latter's bid. Mr. Haavisto disclosed this in a news conference, adding that Helsinki's strong wish is still to join NATO together with Sweden. Russia's deputy foreign minister says it is quite possible the New START nuclear arms control treaty with the United States would end after 2026. Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov made this known in an interview, stating that this was quite a possible scenario. Mr. Ryabkov further added that small steps would be needed for Moscow and Washington to come closer to an agreement on bilateral issues. U.S.-Russia talks on resuming inspections under the New START treaty, which expires in February 2026, were called off at the last minute in November 2022. Neither side has agreed on a time frame for new talks. You're watching Spring Global on Western Spring Television. We will be right back after this break.
Sports is a culture on its own. It has its own language, its own people, with their own way of life. The world of sports is never void of actions, stories, dramas, and scandals. I guess you need a sports show that can walk the walk and talk the talk.
On this show, we answer all your sporting questions. The whens, the whys, the wheres, and even the what ifs. Sports Spring is that show that will give you that new lease of life you've been looking for in sports journalism. Join me, Joseph Atewe,
And your sports Amazon, Nengi Enes.
on this station, Western Spring Television, channel 190, only on Star Times.
Let's talk sports. Let's speak the most universal language of the world.
The history of guns is traced to China. The Chinese had developed a technology civilization that produced devices identified as guns at about 1000 AD. By the end of the 13th century, the devices had become true guns and described as metal-barreled firearms that fired single projectiles which occluded the barrel. When did gun become an instrument of war? The first battles to be decided by firearms were between French and Spanish soldiers. The early 16th century warfare included Magnano in 1515, Bicocca in 1522, and Pavia in 1525. The wars were fought in Italy. The gun is a weapon of destruction and death, but humanity sees it as a potent instrument of family destruction. People with guns feel safer even if they don't display it. Western Spring Television identifies history of guns as a watershed event in history.
Welcome back. Moving on, in the Middle East, Israeli forces have shot dead a Palestinian man in the southern city of Hebron and the occupied West Bank, the latest killing in a wave of escalating violence. The Pakistani Ministry of Health, identifying the deceased as a 26-year-old Nasim Abu Fuda, said he was shot in the head this morning. According to local news agency Wafa, Israeli forces stationed at the military checkpoint 160 south of the Ibrahim Mosque fired live bullets at the young man's vehicle, wounding him with a bullet in the head. Abu Fuda is the 35th Palestinian to be killed by Israeli forces in January 2023. The death toll includes 8 children. The latest killing comes as U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken visits the region. Mr. Blinken is set to meet Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Jerusalem later today, and Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas in Ramallah tomorrow. The Iranian Foreign Ministry has summoned the Ukrainian chargé d'affaires in the country over comments made by a top presidential advisor who linked a recent drone attack in the central Iran to war in Ukraine. The envoy was called today to provide explanations over a Twitter post by Mikhailo Podolak, where he wrote "explosive night in Iran drone and missile production, all refineries," adding that Ukraine did warn Iran. The tweet came shortly after a military factory in Isfahan came under attack from what officials said were 3 quadcopters armed with explosives. Iran's Foreign Minister Hosseini Amiradolhalian on Sunday criticized the drone attack as cowardly, saying it was aimed at jeopardizing the security of the country. In the United Kingdom, thousands of extra hospital beds and hundreds of ambulances will be rolled out in England this year in a bid to tackle the long emergency care delays. The 5,000 new beds will boost capacity by 5%, while the ambulance fleet will increase by 10% with 800 new vehicles. Details of the £1 billion investment have been set out in a joint government and NHS England 2-year blueprint. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said efforts of his government made a difference in the sector.
No, what we've said is we will work towards pre-pandemic levels after next year, but in the short and here and now, what we need to get to is 30 minutes over this year. That's the plan. I think you will also see, I mean, look, it's too early to tell because the numbers will come out in a month. The things that we're already doing, I think you'll see made a difference in January, right? I think you will see a difference in the January numbers compared to December because some of the things we did on discharge to move people out of hospitals have already started to have a bit of an impact. I think hopefully, fingers crossed, when the numbers come out for January, you'll see that things are already starting to improve.
Meanwhile, British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has defended his handling of Nadeem Zahawi's sacking as Tory party chairman. An investigation by the PM's ethic advisor found Mr. Zahawi had breached the ministerial code 7 times while failing to disclose that HMRC was investigating his tax affairs. Mr. Sunak said he acted pretty decisively once the inquiry finished, stating that he followed the right process. However, the opposition Labour Party said the Prime Minister should have sacked Mr. Zahawi long ago. Shadow Secretary for International Trade Nick Thomas called on Rishi Sunak to tell the British public what he knew when Mr. Zahawi was appointed to his cabinet.
Every single Prime Minister, when they appoint somebody to their cabinet, has that conversation, and there's a process that has to be gone through for that person to be appointed. That would have happened with Nadeem Zahawi, as it would have happened with other appointments to the cabinet. This is a Prime Minister who has claimed to put ethics and standards at the very top of his priority list, but it's pretty clear that that isn't the case, and the Prime Minister now must come out and tell us openly what he knew when about Mr. Zahawi and what he knew when Mr. Zahawi was appointed to his cabinet, and also what questions he asked of him.
In business, key Libyan political figures have rejected an $8 billion gas production deal overseen by the Tripoli-based Government of National Unity, GNU, and the Italian government. Rights groups and observers in the country have also criticized memorandums of understanding reached between the two governments aiming to crack down Mediterranean migration flows. The energy deal was signed between Libya's National Oil Corporation and Italian energy firm ENI during a visit by Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni and an accompanying delegation to Tripoli on Saturday, while the memorandums were signed between the two countries' foreign ministers. The GNU's oil and gas minister Mohammed Aoun spoke to newsmen shortly after the gas deal was signed, calling it illegal and that it lacks equality between the Libyan and Italian sides. He also said his ministry was bypassed on the deal, which he pledged to rectify. The ministry released an official statement yesterday reiterating Mr. Aoun's points, further criticizing the deal for increasing the Italian side's shares from 30% to 37%. To some sports stories, Everton have named former Burnley boss Sean Dyche as their new manager. The Toffees sacked Frank Lampard last week, with the club 19th in the Premier League and 2 points from safety following a 2-0 defeat by West Ham. Mr. Dyche has been out of work since he was dismissed by Claret last April after almost 10 years at the club. His immediate task will be to guide Everton out of the relegation zone and to safety with 18 games of the season remaining. Brighton have rejected a second bid from Arsenal for Ecuador midfielder Moses Caicedo and told the Premier League leaders he is not for sale. The latest bid is thought to be in the region of £70 million. Arsenal and Chelsea both had offers for the 21-year-old turned down last week. Caicedo informed Brighton in an open letter that he wanted a move, but the club responded by telling him to take time off until after tomorrow's transfer